that so fast. So that I'm going to know I'm going to have gas later. Well, I thought we'd have a few people here. I got some people say they're coming, so they're probably not. But that's all right. If we want to just talk, then look, you have to talk too. Now, I know Shawn will talk. We can talk about Paul. We can talk about resurrection, how many, or we can talk about the Beatles' Black Album.
I have a kind of like a introductory thing, so to speak, I guess. Something I was thinking about is, I think that, at least personally, I think I'll start my video. So you can see my happy shining face.
Good for you. I'm glad. You need to have your camera on. Go ahead and get the thing started. You'll be the host of it pretty soon.
Yeah, I don't know about that. So I was thinking about the Nazarene Acts, and that, depending on how much value, I guess, somebody would put on that, would depend on how you would interpret a lot of the New Testament, I think. Because if we are to believe what Clement says he learned from Peter, that came out of his own mouth, there's some stuff with our Torah that shouldn't be in there. And so if that's true, I'm thinking back to Paul, which is what we're really talking about. But so that makes, if that's true, I think of statements that Paul makes about the law, the seemingly violent statements he makes about the law. And I wonder, don't we think kind of the same way about some of it? I mean, I won't say we, but me personally, I mean, I've seen now through my studies that the sacrifices, either they were never instituted and they were added later, or one of it, the recognition says they were never ordained. Then I think the homily says that Moses allowed them because he couldn't, the people were just had it inbred in them, and with the idea that the Navi would come and set it straight later. That, to me, that fits more in line with the overall flow of the scripture as I see it anyway. But going on that makes statements, because there is a lot of the Torah that even Yeshua, as he was walking the earth, he corrected so many of the teachings that were being taught at that time. And, and I think it goes back to just not following the Torah. But, the Torah of Yahweh, I believe, was much simpler than what we have in our scriptures. I think it was the 10 words, because really, if you think about it, if you honestly live your life from your heart, a prayerful life following the 10 commandments, how are you going to sin? I mean, you're loving your neighbor as you do yourself. You're loving the Father Yah above everything, and you're following in spirit, and you're working that spiritual belief out in your actions. You're going to keep yourself from sin that way. So, and so I have to wonder, is it fair to, maybe Paul was right in some of his railings. Maybe the Torah he was talking about wasn't the Torah that Kafah was speaking about, the original Torah before the sin of the golden calf. If Paul was indeed also trying to turn, because I was reading Ephesians today, and I know that some people don't believe he wrote it, but I think it's a fairly accurate representation of some of the stuff. Like if you compare it to Philippians, it kind of fits some of those same things. But and everybody quotes Ephesians 2:8-9, and then they compare it to James, but they don't read verse 10. Verse 10 says that we were ordained unto good works, which Yahweh before ordained that we should walk in them. Well, if we think about what are those ordinances that Yahweh before ordained, it's obviously his Torah. So he's not saying you have to keep it for salvation, so to speak. He's saying a believer will walk out his life and emulate those things of the Torah, and like the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians and all that speaks to that as well. So I'm trying. Then if you read through the authentic letters of Paul as well, that also to me helped me greatly through it. But so I'm kind of being a little less critical of Paul. That on top of the fact that the stark reality is our Father Yahweh brought judgment on Israel and Jerusalem. He destroyed the city. He brought judgment by the Roman army. His people were obliterated. They scattered and they lived in remnants. And that was it for 2,000 years. The gospel has gone to the nations, to the Gentiles, and which are included in my opinion, the people that live in Israel today that claim to be Jews are no different than a Gentile nowadays. Nowadays, I believe, you become part of the true Israel of Yahweh through his son. And that's just it, and this is just, again, my opinions of the whole thing. But so I'm kind of thinking about Paul, in my opinion, I see, judging on what he was up against going into Europe to bring the gospel, there was just some things he couldn't do, and we can, and there's an argument that could be made about circumcision. Are we talking about physical circumcision, or are we talking about the same circumcision Yahweh mentions in his Torah, the circumcise your hearts first? Without a circumcision of our hearts to our Father, the physical doesn't even matter. Of course we know that now, but so I'm starting to look at Paul a little bit differently. I'm trying to look at things. I think Paul was very spiritual in some ways, maybe, and maybe it was just because of his Roman mindset. But maybe, just maybe, there's some things he has to speak that's valuable. That maybe, if Second Peter was written by Peter, and if he did say there were some things that he wrote that was hard to understand, honestly, we can kind of see that, especially trying to sort out where does the quote unquote Jewishness part of our faith ends and when does the Roman part begin. So anyway, those are the kind of things I've been thinking about. Those are kind of some of the conclusions that I've came to. And I was very interested to hear what other people's thoughts were on that. So thanks, guys, for listening. I appreciate it.
Wow. That was a whole gamut of stuff there. Anybody else have something to say in regards to his questions? Speak right up, or you'll have to listen to me for 20 minutes. Some of the things that came to my mind when you were talking was that there's more than 10 commandments. I think the heart of the Torah, besides the 10 commandments, which really they're not set apart that much. Of course, they're called 2 words. 10 words, I'm sorry. But we've got the ordinances on blood. That goes for consuming blood, for mixing with pagan cultures, race mixing maybe. That's all blood stuff. As you go through, like Enoch in the animal apocalypse, that really gives you some idea just how important this blood stuff was to the people of that time. Very, very, very important. And you look at Pincus and the Pincus priesthood. Pincus or Phineas killed the priest and the foreign wife with one spear, and he was told, "You'll always have a man to stand before me." That was a good thing. I mentioned the food ordinances, the feasts. Comparing that to, let's say, the Christian idea of, love God, love one another. What is love? What is that? To love one another? Well, that's very subjective. Everybody has their own idea what that means, and certainly the word in Greek, agape or ahava in Hebrew, doesn't mean, did it mean then, certainly what it means now. Then we've got the Nazarene Acts, and you've got, they're primarily the recognitions, and you've got the homilies. They both came from the same source. And believe it or not, the Acts of the Apostles came from the same source as well. That's one thing that Robert Eisenman taught me that kind of blew my mind. And I had to, going through the Nazarene Acts again when I did that audio book, I saw what he was saying was right. They both used the same sources, at least for part of it. And it seems to me like many scholars say, that Nazarene Acts, despite whenever it was actually written or what language it was written in, because nobody really knows, it contains some very early primitive teachings like the standing man and several more here, especially that we find then in the debates with Simon Magus. It's genius the way he speaks and tops the magician time after time after time. I think, what kind of a mind produced this? Well, what else? It would have to be an apostolic mind. Another thing, you mentioned Ephesians. I'm loath to say this, but just because it may not be Paul doesn't mean it's spurious. It all goes back to who divided out this canon. And the first canon that we really have, the Jews divided out, and then all the books that we revere, like Enoch and like Jubilees and any kind of apocalyptic books, the Pharisees left out. Even today, the rabbinicals won't read them. You're not supposed to read them. Even pastors say don't read them. There are things there that are not for everybody. They're just from the deeper learner. And another thing I want to mention to you is that just because it's written down in what's considered a holy book doesn't mean it's right. You have to use your own mind, your own discernment. You are supposedly endued with a new and right spirit. That's a human spirit that can get in touch with the Great Spirit. It's not like the Holy Spirit comes in and takes over your body. No, what you're given when you're born again is a new and right spirit, the human spirit that you lost in Adam. And you should be able to make a connection, and you should be able to petition your own spirit, which is growing, to find out some of the answers to these questions and not be so perturbed in your mind. And then finally, one more thing. I've certainly not answered your questions because I'm not quite clear on what they are, but I don't know if you read that little paper about the new perspective on Paul. And the way I understand that new perspective through the lectures that I've done on that is primarily that Paul didn't do any wrong. What he actually did was he made a way that Gentiles could come in. Now, I don't know if that's approved by Elohim or not. I don't know. I can't see anybody anointed to the point where they could jettison some of Elohim's words in regards to what we do and what we don't do for any reason, especially as you see, and as I mentioned time and time again, that it seems like what he jettisoned were the ones that were illegal in Europe, because he was not considered a Jew anymore. Jews had sanction. They had sanction in Europe to do what they did. Paul was not considered a Jew anymore, because what is a Jew? It's somebody that follows the Torah. If you don't do that anymore, you're no longer a Jew. So he was categorized a foreign religion or foreign superstition, or as an atheist. And if you notice, at the end of Paul's journey, at least according to some of those pastoral epistles, Paul ended up a loser. He lost his crowd. But his way is a lot easier, especially when it comes to circumcision. Now, why would what Elohim commands that to the first Israelites, for instance, why wouldn't that be valid today? The only place where you find that it's not valid, it's always valid, but it's not valid in Paul's writings. And of course, the Torah talks about, and the prophets, about the circumcision of the lips and the circumcision of the heart and all these different things. That does not negate the fact that the Torah talks about the need for circumcision. Now, I wouldn't like that any more than anyone, but when people have asked me, should I get circumcised? And I think that if you went to meeting on Shabbat every week, and whoever was teaching Torah, that person that's teaching is not going to come to that passage and say, no, but you don't have to do this anymore. Understand that Paul was a Pharisee. He was not an Essene, though he tries to scarf up a number of their concepts. He claims to be a Pharisee, and not a very good one. But the Pharisees were compromisers. That is clear enough in their compromise with the Romans in order to keep their foreign superstition going. After Rome destroyed everything, they made a deal with them. And of course, that deal included compromise. And one of the compromises there was to get rid of the apocalyptic literature, because that's what fired everybody up all the time, to get them to want to fight off whoever their captors were. So when it comes down to what to believe, maybe the best thing is don't believe anything, but hope for all that's good. I have a hard time anymore that I'm not a little kid anymore, believing this, that, and the other thing. And even if I have to reject these things in older life, I still have hope enough that they're true in order to keep keeping them. So I think you've got to have a compromise with yourself. And as Wesley said, these things come along late in life, when you start feeling, as Maslow said, self-actualized, or Fowler says, up on the top tier of stages of faith. It doesn't make any difference how faithful you are or how devout you are. In your mind, you're not going to be able to get to the top echelon until you're older, when your mind starts changing and you experience that second naivete, when you start turning back into a child again. You heard of that before? The second naivete, the second
Oh
innocence.
yeah.
Okay,
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Yep.
good, good. So now, Shawn, give us those questions succinctly, because now Shober's here and we can get the word on this.
Okay. To begin with, I guess the first question we'd have to ask would be, what type of value does one put on the Nazarene Acts? I mean, do we believe that those are when Clement says Peter said this, do we think those are as authoritative as what we have in our scriptures, I guess, would be the first question. Because I'm under the opinion that imagine if the book of Acts wasn't in our scriptures, but the Nazarene Acts was, I think our Christianity would look a bit different than it does today.
Definitely.
For sure. For the better. I mean, for the more, yet the better, the more accurate, for sure. So, so that would be my first question.
If it's not Peter, then it's some genius. Continue, please.
Okay, and then the next question would be, going to AD 70 would be 66 to 73 after the Great Tribulation. If we take the writing of Josephus and the other ones, and that make testimony, written testimony that the coming of the Messiah came. I mean, they saw the battle in the sky and judgment was brought. Everything was done. It was done. So now I kind of take a step back. So for the next 2,000 years, that tie is gone. All we have up until the Dead Sea Scrolls was just Roman Christianity. So all based on Paul.
That's not quite true.
Okay, well then help me out there, brother.
Yeah, but the more valid type of Christianity was suppressed, but never gone. It's been in a minority stream the whole time. Even in the Catholic Church, there was a strong but minority movements the entire time for something that looks a lot more like Protestantism or even Jewish Christianity. Because they hogged the field doesn't mean that right thinking wasn't also being practiced. It's just that the Catholics were very literate. And they also, the second thing, they were willing to kill anybody that didn't agree with them, including some very, very holy men like John Knox. Okay, that's the second one. I'm making note of these. So state that again, please, shortly.
I guess the best way to state it would be, with the judgment on Jerusalem done and everybody scattered, Roman Christianity basically has been what we have. Now I did read somewhere that I know that a lot of the believers that were scattered through all that did seek sanctuary in the Catholic Church. I think Spain had a group of believers, didn't they, where they were actually hiding in plain sight up to a point. Then eventually they got found out or persecuted, or I can't remember what happened to them, but I remember they eventually got found out. So I do realize there was that. And then I also have to wonder, regarding back to Paul, his original writings compared to what we have today and what's basically been created out of those scriptures today. Is that a fair assessment of what Paul initially wrote and what he meant when he wrote it? I guess would be the final overall question.
All right, I wrote those down and see if I'm close. Did Peter really speak in the Acts, or are the beliefs and practices, they're authentic to the Nazarenes. Think like James Trim might say, those people in the Nazarene Acts aren't Nazarenes, they're Ebionites. That might be true. I gave that the title Nazarene Acts because that's what Hugh Schoenfield called it, who was a real pioneer in bringing that piece of literature out into the public. Hold on just a second, please. That's the first question. Oh, I had to turn the air off. It got cold in here. Second, with the judgment of Jerusalem done, why was Roman Christianity so prevalent? That sound about right? Hello?
Yeah, no, I'm here. Yep. Basically that's right. But basically with the thought of it became the only type of Christianity, but except for the ones we just spoke of, but by and large it was, and what it became was it really what Paul meant back in the beginning when he penned it? If that helps.
Say that again?
The fact that Roman Christianity was the one that basically took off for the next 2,000 years, and what it's became, is that a correct reflection of what Paul wrote back when he wrote it? Is this what he was thinking? Or so was his original writings more less Roman, I guess is what I'm trying to say, more in lines with proper doctrine? We just have things been added, redacted, and all that over the last 2,000 years, so to speak, and where he skewed, so to speak.
Yeah, I would say, I would just add here, we talked not too long ago about revelation, progressive revelation. Roman Christianity was hyper progressive revelation because they had a man on earth here that whatever his whim was became the law. He was Christ on earth, vicar of Christ. So when that Pope wanted that Bishop of Rome, who left out the Bishop of Jerusalem altogether, when he wanted to change something in the church, all he had to do was say it. All he had to do was put it out there, and the armies that he had would they would police it and make sure that it happened. And so that Christianity of Romanism went extremely far from Paul, especially in their theology, their Christology, their practice, in every particular way. Even, don't you, when you see the Vatican and these homosexuals with their red robes on and their pomp and circumstance, and don't you see gray faces there?
Absolutely.
Don't you see that these people are as lost as Hogan's goat? That's because of the hyper revelation evolution that church has gone through probably since the days of St. Thomas Aquinas. He's not a saint to me, but that's when they really dipped into paganism and the idea that, as far as the Protestant churches, the idea that the law is nailed to the cross. from one little passage in Colossians that doesn't even say that. It says the handwriting of ordinances. And if you look at a better translation of that, what it's talking about is your long list of things that have offended the Father, if you even could do that. All right, number 3 I got was, is Christianity a fair assessment of the teachings of Paul? That's part of that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of strung it all together there.
Well, they should call it Christianities, because though they're all pretty close, they're not all real close. There are some chief differences, as you know. You can just look at the difference between, say, Hebrew Roots and a Hardshell Baptist Church. I mean, I don't think those people could even sit in the same room with each other.
No, I don't think so either.
When I go to church, I got some people there that are always asking me about shofars and what do you do? And does somebody really blow a shofar? I mean, this is the most common thing in the world to us. But to them, it's like secret knowledge. You have to hide to ask anybody about it. You have to sneak around. And this is right, these parishioners, they'll sneak around and ask these questions about Hebrew roots. It's like, well, this is so, it's like asking, it's like telling you that the tzitzis you're wearing are really cool roach clips. You know what I mean? They have no idea of anything like that. And instead of even looking at the Torah, 2/3 of which we can't do because there's no temple, they say, because they've heard it so many times, who can do all those laws? Those are passed away with Jesus. He did away with the law. They neither know the scriptures or the power of Elohim because they're a New Testament. Even Paul talks about the importance of keeping a discipline. And we can see now what's happened with the religion of Yahweh down through these years, because the discipline has become so lax that everybody is a Torah unto himself. And you know that's true. There are no standards at all. And so the purest notion of Christianity has just disappeared. It's just crashed out. That's what we've been trying to look toward all these years with the research and all the attempts at congregation and all the times I've been fired and all this stuff. I mean, look, do you want to be authentic? But I hear Christians say, oh, I know I'm saved and I'm going off to heaven. Honey, you don't know anything unless I don't interpret the scripture correctly. But what are you interpreting? It's certainly not this Bible you carry around. And the pablum that they're being taught by these preachers and ignorant teachers about what's lawful, what's nomian, what's anomian, what's unlawful. If we go back to Torah, what is the punishment for some of these unlawful things? What about adultery? For instance, isn't there a death penalty for that? What about Sabbath breaking? They do it all the time. And here we find a slippery slope. What are we going to do? Stand up for those people? say that they're just ignorant, or their teachers aren't leading in the right direction, or they never understood this, or it's too hard for them to read? Or are we going to say, hey, the Torah says this, I'm banking on the spirit of Elohim and the discipline he's given us, and that's where my hope is. Of course, in the Christianity today, you've got condemnation on works righteousness, whatever that is. Yet I read in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, works righteousness among all those gospel writers, at least the ones that are Hebrew in background. John, Matthew, Hebrews, Jude, James, they're all works righteousness. But what we want to see is works come out of the love of the Father and the discipline of the Torah. I didn't mean to go on like that. Sorry. Well, kind of off topic question, but was Zechariah 14:4 not a prophecy for Yahshua's return? Can we move over to that for a few minutes?
Absolutely, sure.
Okay, let's see what it actually says. I know that's the Feast of Tabernacles passage, I think. All right, let me see what, here's an ESV, that'll have to do. On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that one half of the mount shall move northward and the other half southward. Mouse drive. Okay, tell me what it means, and then I'll tell you what I think. I need to look up a passage here.
I'll go. I don't think it's, I think that's speaking of, I'm under the impression that the entire book of Revelation is not done yet. I still believe that at the end of the sixth day, the 6,000 years, that there's still going to be 1,000 years of work we're going to have to do in the kingdom.
Oh, definitely. I'm with you on that.
That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. There's another verse that comes close to this. It's Revelation 16:19. This is in the ESV. It just happens to be the one I'm looking at. The great city was split into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. That should be tribes, not nations. The cities of the tribes fell, and Elohim remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the vine of the fury of his wrath. Now, of course, they're talking about the tale of two cities here, Rome and Jerusalem, because you see a number of times in Revelation, it's you can't tell which one they're really talking about. They've got the two as one. So we've got the city split into three parts in Revelation 16:19 and Zechariah 14. On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem. Okay, Shawn, you got the knowledge on this one. We've discussed this several times. What happens there in Revelation 16? What is it referring to? Is it the same thing that's referred to in Zechariah 14:4? Or should we look up the entirety of Revelation 16? I think they're the same thing. You're going to check it out?
Yeah, no, I did. I don't think they're the same thing. And is there any historical evidence that anybody knows of anything like this happening during that time frame? I mean, you would think if there was an earthquake that split the Mount of Olives in two, we would have some kind of testimony of that.
Yes, you've got to look at it in a little more figurative manner. About Jerusalem splitting in three, it did split into three. It did, and there was an earthquake. Remember the guys from down there in Arabia, I can't think of who it was, right south there, south of Benjamin. Who are those guys? I'm just reading this again the other day. They came up to help the zealots, but they wouldn't let them into Jerusalem, and they got madder than heck. And it says that they stayed outside the gates, and there's a terrible storm and an earthquake. So after that, they had no tents, they had no shelter. Jerusalem didn't give them shelter, even though they came to fight on their behalf, because the people that were in charge of the gate at that time thought that these people were coming in. Oh, what is that tribe down south of Benjamin? Idumea. The Idumeans brought 20,000 troops up or so. A lot of troops. Got a bad storm. The people, the priests had the gate at that time, and they wouldn't let them in. And they had to sit out there with absolutely no shelter in a terrible storm and an earthquake. And undoubtedly, in the morning, it's still pouring down, and they're madder than hell. Excuse my language. And finally, the zealots got down there and got the gate open, and those people were so mad, the Idumeans, they came in and tore the whole town up. And then Josephus tells us that the city was split in three, not only by that earthquake, but by three walls. And not only by three walls, but by three armies. You've got John of Giscala. You've got Simon, the temple police, and Eleazar, the third guy of the Sicarii. They take three different places in Jerusalem, and they fought each other the entire time, even when the Romans came upon them. Most of the people who died in Jerusalem, and there were like 1,100,000 that died there, according to one account. They died because these three factions, these three sections of Jerusalem, would not allow them to live. They threw them off. They threw them off the wall. They starved them to death. They ate them. They robbed them and murdered them. And again, we're talking about 1 million people in there, even during Pascha. But in that passage in Revelation, Jerusalem is broken into three, and that's the three. So also you've got the three frogs there too. In Zechariah, we have it broken into two first. That's what the earthquake did. Broke it into two. So that's what comes from the historical record from Josephus as far as having any kind of proof that Yahshua and his host, Yahweh Sabaoth, with his saints were up on Mount Zion looking down. All we have is the word of John. He's just not talking about ethereal things. He is writing about solid, real things in such a way as the enemy couldn't discern what he's talking about. So what Josephus says is that they saw all this fighting in the air and soldiers and chariots and everything. And I'm thinking that that's what they got to see of Yahshua and his host on Mount Zion from Revelation 16, looking down and supervising the day of the Lord, the destruction in Jerusalem. It's never happened since, even during the Crusades. What did it happen? 4 times in the history of Israel? So will Jerusalem break again into 3? Look at Jerusalem. It's the second most power on the earth. I don't think it will. You can't just think, well, it broke into 3 because of a little earthquake or something like that. It broke into 3 in certainly more ways because there was well-known 3 sections in that city with 3 bloody men that took over and killed everybody. That's my take on it. And as far as Zechariah 14:4, those passages are close enough that certainly Revelation got that from Zechariah 14:4. Where did I say that was? In Revelation 16? Yeah, Revelation 16. He added one more part to it. How could that happen again? There's no fault line there. There's nothing rattling the ground there right now. If that's supposed to happen in the future, well, maybe there will be in 1,000 years. But it doesn't look like it now. Jerusalem is one of the most guarded cities, if not the most guarded in the entire world. What army's going to go in there? I know that the Baptists think that the Arabs are going to go in there and tear the town down again. And go walk in and foil the temple that's not even there so that the Messiah can come. But they're not, that kind of thinking is not realistic for our time. Haven't the Arabs already tried 3 times to tear that place apart? And they're no better off now than they were then. They could do no better now than then if you look at the armaments of Israel, the IMF and all that.
Yeah, the Israeli army is highly trained and they're also a nuclear power. So if it got to the point where their country was about to be overrun, I mean, he would have to launch his nuclear weapons, and I'm sure they would know that. So a war over there trying to take Israel, in my opinion, would be an absolute horror, because it would have to escalate eventually to nuclear. How else would Israel defend themselves if the entire Muslim horde, so to speak, attacked?
Muslim hordes, definitely. How? Well, there's hordes of them, but they threw the hordes at Israel all these other times. They never got anywhere with it. Even the first time, they lost their portion of Jerusalem, the West Bank, half of Syria. So I'm thinking that those people in Israel, they are ready to roll at any time. In fact, I read an article last week, that Israel was suspected of being ready to bomb some of these countries right now, Iran and Syria, getting ready to bomb them. maybe I'm listening to too many thriller novels about Jerusalem and wars lately, but I'm pretty sure that was in the epic or epoch times regarding, and I don't know if Anne's still here, but she knows a lot about the armaments of Israel. Who's going to go in there? You know what the rest of the Arab countries would do? They would send King Insane in there in Jordan. They'll send King Insane at the head of his army in there to get beaten to a pulp again, just like they did before. These other countries are in too bad a shape, with the exception of Iran, maybe. And Iran is kind of like my father. He said, I'm good for one punch, but that's all. They're good for one punch, and that's all. Sorry to get on my high horse about this. But then again, don't take my word that it's not a future thing. It may be. I don't feel it that way. And I feel like, well, if you go back again to Zechariah 14, let's see if I can get the rest of it. It's just an amazing story. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem. On the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley, with half the mountain moving north and half moving south. We read that. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. So this is a different version now. We've got just Zechariah 4. Let me get back and see if I can get the whole chapter here. Should this be read through? It's just rich. It's this part toward the end here that's so amazing. Oh, the whole thing. The whole land shall be turned into a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem shall remain aloft on its site from the gate of Benjamin to the place of the former gate, to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananiel to the king's wine presses, and it shall be inhabited. For there shall never again be a decree of utter destruction. So we've got to be talking about either 70 AD or sometime way off in the future. For there shall never again be a decree of utter destruction. Isn't that what the day of the Lord is? And when this was written, Zechariah, I suspect, was written during the dispersion. Jerusalem shall dwell in security, and this shall be the plague with which Yahweh will strike all the peoples that wage war against Jerusalem. Look at this. Their flesh will rot while they're still standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. Now, what is that? Is that some new fungus? That sounds to me like radiation. That sounds like a nuke. And on that day, a great panic from Yahweh shall fall on them, so that each will seize the hand of another, and the hand of the one will be raised against the hand of the other. Even Yehuda will fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations shall be collected, gold, silver, and garments in great abundance, and a plague like the plague, like this plague, shall fall on the horses, the mules, the camels, the donkeys, and whatever beast may be in those camps. I understand that animals can get COVID. Then everyone who survives of all the nations, read tribes again. Ethne means tribes. Then everyone who survives of all the tribes that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King, Yahweh, Sabaoth, Lord of hosts, and keep the Feast of Booths. Is that not amazing? People say, I don't have enough money to go to Feast of Tabernacles. Well, I think that's part of Torah. If at all possible, you go. That's why Yahweh makes a way for you to do that. And if any of the families of the earth don't go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, Yahweh Sabaoth, there will be no rain on them. Can you imagine a better thing to do? I wouldn't doubt that Yahweh has given Israel some kind of technology to actually make that happen. No, the people left in Iran, hopefully this will be in a time when we who are millennial workers will be working through that place, and that all evil will have been taken from the earth. That's supposed to be the first thing that happens in the millennium. And if the family of Egypt doesn't go up and present themselves, then on them there shall be no rain. There shall be the plagues with which Yahweh afflicts the nations, the tribes, that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. This shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all the tribes that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. Of course, I don't think that they had in mind the entire round earth in those days. And certainly there weren't Torah keepers all over the earth in those days. They were Torah keepers you would find between the Nile and the Euphrates. That's about all. And so on that day, there shall be inscribed on the bells of their horses, holy to Yahweh, kadosh Yahweh. We see something very similar to this in Haiti. All those taxis, little trucks, they call them top-tops. They have sayings on them, like Blessed Messiah, or Holy to the Lord, or something like that. All of them, Merci Dieu, have mercy, God, in French. And the pots in the houses of Yahweh shall be as the bowls before the altar. Go down there, take a little time, and you'll see all this already. It's a good thing, I think, that the devil doesn't want anybody going down there to help out, because what they will see is among the worst place in the whole Western Hemisphere to be. Holiness still shines forth in a greater way than it does in our country. Every pot in Jerusalem and Yehuda shall be holy to the Lord of hosts. Do you think that that's toilets too? Chamber pots? So that all who sacrifice may come and take of them and boil the meat of the sacrifice in them. But there were some that couldn't be holy, like clay pots couldn't be unless they were fired. Wooden pots couldn't be. Anything porous couldn't be. This is a big deal in the MMT document of the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can't purify something that's dirty by pouring something in from a clean pot. Yet the Pharisees turn this around. They say, if you dribble a little clean water into the dirty water, that sanctifies it. Just the opposite. And there shall no longer be a traitor in the house of Yahweh Sabaoth on that day. Wow, I love that chapter. Thank you, Steve. You get another award. But yes, this plays not only in to the end of the first century, but it plays into our days. This is for all time. This is put up in the sky as a semeion, a sign for the people hostile to Yahweh. And of course, like every other sign, for the most part, they're going to ignore it. They don't care what it is. They're too used to their own convenience and their own way to have any discipline at all. And now we go back full circle and look at this in the perspective of the recognitions and of today's church. Everything is for convenience. And I think if these cardinals and bishops, popes, could see from the perspective of our eyes how ridiculous they look and how very ungodly they look. Do they look any better from the eyes of Messiah on Mount Zion? Don't they just look to you like so much vermin? People that have sold out long ago for whatever they get from there. The journalists that investigated homosexuality in the church estimated there at least 80% of those people are homosexual pedophiles. That's a statistic that came out about 3 years ago. 80% are living in that sin and addressing accordingly. They make me sick. But we still try to love any way we can, even if it means rendering a harsh rebuke. Now see what you did? Oh, Onieh. Amen. No toilets. That's why we pass out those odds, those little shovels. You can go to Beit So and go to the bathroom. Amen. All right, so time is up here unless you want to continue. I'm sorry I have monopolized the last 20 minutes. I didn't mean to. But one of these days we'll get some of you folk to talk, like Jeff Hallal and Mike the Man Spencer. I'm glad to see you here. Mike Spencer just came off of being a big facilitator for a huge Zoom meeting. Wow, it's great to have a celebrity here. And here's another one. Andrew Carlson, a huge celebrity. I think so. Very. He's got the goods. Steve McGuire, he's here. Winner of the Most Valuable Player Award in the Yahad 2021. And a well-noted shofarim, a person who is called to play the shofar every week. Did I miss anybody?
Yourself.
Okay. Anybody have another topic, or do you want, if Onieh is here, that means it'd be a good time to go and retire. I think he left.
No, I didn't leave. No, I just wanted to say Shawn had invited me on, but I was sleeping, so I came on late. My apologies. But you do this every Tuesday?
Yeah, you're a big celebrity though, so just to have you come on is a real great thing. Listen,
Well, maybe we'll have me do more stuff with you guys again.
sure.
I'd be open to that.
I didn't do anything for a long time because I was sick. I finally came out of it. But Robert Eisenman wants to come on here.
Yeah, I heard about that. So
You know
would that
him?
be Tuesdays, or would that be a different day?
I could
or-
get him. He said he wants to come on anytime. I mean, he contacted me this time.
I remember you had him on a few times before.
Yeah, I
in the past.
did.
So it'd be cool to have him back.
You were in Douglas, weren't you, Andrew? Douglas, Georgia at one time?
Yeah. Now he wasn't there, right? He
No, he did a
was
Zoom thing
virtual.
here.
Yeah.
He's an old man. He wants to fly over here. Actually, right now I'm getting evicted, as you know.
Oh, I didn't
So,
hear that.
yeah, the landlord wants to sell this house out from under us. So he's given us 3 weeks to get out of here. And we're working on it.
So
You know, it's like in the New Testament. Who are you to tell me what I'm to do with my own money? He owns the place. He has the right to do that. He's doing it, but I don't know. 3 weeks is a little short.
yeah. You're looking for another place down there, or a
Yeah.
different state?
Yes, I got a job down here that pays real well.
Oh,
A
okay.
part-time job. Yeah.
good
I
job.
get how much do I get? $600-700 for about 4 hours work a week.
Very good. Very good.
Wow, that is good. I thought if I don't have that, I won't be living anywhere except in a yurt out in the desert. I can come up and stay with you. You still at home?
Yeah, I still with my parents. So
Okay. Those dogs, I don't want to stay with those dogs. I've been up at Andrew's house.
yeah,
You know, I like to hang around there a lot.
that was fun.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Okay, pray about it. And thank you for coming. Yeah, we're going to do this on Tuesdays. And I promise that Anne, if she comes again, I'll give her a time that she'll cut me off when I get on a tear. Okay?
I can't do that.
Why not? Yes, you can.
I like to hear what you have to say.
Well, I don't want to bloviate like maybe Onieh does.
certainly not.
Bloviate on for hours at a time, and Shawn does. Okay, folks, love you.
Hey, Jack,
See you soon.
Jackson.
Yeah, Mike, you the man.
Hey, yeah, no, you're the man.
No, you're the man.
Well, okay, you're the man.
No, I know I'm not.
We're still
You-
doing that.
Yeah, we're still. How many years have we been doing that?
I don't
8 or
know.
10
I think
years.
last time we were with Eisenman, I think that was the 18th century. We were all together at
That's
Jeanette's
right.
house.
You were there in
I was
Oklahoma.
there. Yeah,
What was
Yeah,
it? Tulsa, Oklahoma. You were there. You're the
I
man.
was there. You were there.
Yeah,
We
I
were
was
the
there
men.
too. He's the man.
Yeah, he is. I've called him a few times.
Have you? Does he talk to you?
Well, he doesn't remember me, but
Oh.
it just depends on his mood. I don't know if he's eating strawberries or wild mushrooms. I just, sometimes he's okay, and other times he's like, "Who are you? Why'd you call me?" And
Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
okay.
He wants some kratom. So I'm going to send him some kratom and see if that won't mellow him out a little bit.
I'm sure it would.
Mhm.
I'm sure it would. Hey, I got a new phone, and I don't see you in my phone anymore. So what'd you do with the number?
Use chat. How's Jewel doing?
She's fine. She's right here with me.
Hi, Jewel. Yahweh be with you. Let me give you my number too. You put it in the chat and I'll put mine in.
Okay.
I
Jackson said, "Hi,
finally got a
baby."
phone that works.
Okay, I'm typing right now. Yeah, I lost my mom in March. They killed her in the hospital.
Really?
That was, yeah, oh yeah. It was a nightmare. She went in with a broken leg and came out dead.
I just lost
And,
mine too in the hospital. She got hit by a car, broke her leg, and all of a sudden she was dead. I mean, what's happening here? Parallel lives?
Well, I know what happened. I was there. I nearly got arrested handling the doctors and what they were doing with her. And
Did she have
And-
COVID or just a broken leg?
no, she never had COVID. They put her on a COVID floor. They tested her when she went into the hospital because they were under this scam-demic crap that was going on. They started testing her with the swabs, and they were running the swabs through the well, I forgot what the terminology is, but they were poking through, getting into the blood-brain barrier, and she was not feeling good. And two
Poke
days
that
after,
thing right up through the blood, through the brain there?
yes,
Oh my
Yep.
God.
yep. And then she update. Hang on, I'm updating real quick. 0762. Okay, is your old number, is this still good?
What
The
is it?
9468 is the last four.
No, I put the new one on here, 772-532-0762, and it's working. I think it is. I have not
Okay,
got a phone call since I got it, but
okay.
I
I
assume
got
it's
you
working.
saved in.
Okay,
But
great.
anyway, my mom got respiratory pneumonia 2 days after being in the hospital, so they couldn't do surgery on her. And they were sticking needles in her heart and her lungs and remove the fluid. And we don't know if they gave her remdesivir. I don't know what all happened. It was just a weird deal. And so they finally did the surgery on her, and then she came out of that, and she was in recuperation, and then they needed to move her to rehab, and the rehab place required that they test any new patients coming in every 24 hours. They have to test negative for COVID. They've already tested her 7 times before this. So
Oh my.
they started testing her. And then they would get ready to move her to rehab, and the rehab couldn't take her. So that went on multiple more times. Then she gets into rehab, and she's there for about a day and a half, 2 days. They put her on a COVID floor. She still does not test positive for COVID. And my sister's friend came by. We couldn't see my mom, but she came. They allowed her to come in and drop off some clothes and stuff for her. And she was looking at her through the plexiglass, and she picked up the phone and called my sister and said, "You need to get up here from Fort Worth. I think your mother is dying." So my sister bolted back up to Oklahoma and got in there, and she said she needs to go back to the hospital. I want her out of there now. So when they were transferring my mom to the hospital, she had bruises all over the back of her arms, on the back of her legs. She had a rash on her rear. And my mom kept saying, whenever she was coherent, "Don't leave me in here. They're trying to kill me. They're trying to kill me," over and over and over.
How long
And
was she there, Mike?
she was there for 2 days. They take her back to the hospital.
Unbelievable.
The doctors freak out and say, "What in the hell happened to this lady? She just left 2 days ago. Something's not right here." So they put her back in the hospital. She was there for about a week and a half. And then they came to us and they said, "Well, you're going to have to move her to another facility because her insurance doesn't pay for anything, or start selling off her estate to pay for the hospital bill." So my sister investigated and found 2 places in Tulsa. One was $14,000 a month. The other one was $9,000. And my mom didn't have any of that kind of money. We didn't have that. So my sister found a place in Fort Worth at $4,000 a month. And so my brother and sister and I all agreed to let her go down there. And she was real close to my sister where she could see her every day.
Good.
So they loaded her up on a Sunday, drove her down to the hospital, or I mean the hospice or whatever, the home or the care facility. And the next day my sister was getting ready to, she was leaving in New Mexico to take her daughter as a high school present for graduation. And they're on the road, and the hospital calls, or the facility calls and says, "Hey, we want to let you know your mom's in transition." And
What's that, you say?
yeah, well, no, my sister thought transition. Oh, well, that's the transition from Tulsa to Fort Worth.
I thought that was like dying. She's
It
in
is.
transition.
It is. They wouldn't use that words. My sister didn't know what was going on.
What it was.
So she went on to New Mexico, and they said, "Look, we put your mom on morphine IV drip, and she's transitioning." And my sister said, "Okay, well, I'll be back once we get through doing what we're doing." And so my sister gets to New Mexico around midnight, and they call back and say, "Look, you might want to come back. Your mom's transitioning." And my sister goes, "What in the world is transitioning?" They said, "Well, she's having difficulty breathing. She's fighting because she got pneumonia again. And so we've had to pull the IV out. Now we're giving her morphine drops. And you need to come back if you want to, you need to come see her." So my sister didn't even get her luggage unloaded. They loaded back up and they raced back, and they got back to the hospital, or to the facility, around 6:30, and my mom had passed at 6. So my mom was physically abused. I don't know what all happened, but anyway, I went through that in March, lost my job in October. But I think I've never been more happier than I've ever been in my life, because our divine creator has just enabled me to shuck off all of the trauma and everything. And I just look at life in a whole different perspective of a lens.
What a
And
blessing.
when what we were talking about earlier today, when we were doing the phone call on Telegram, if this thing goes through, what we were talking about, what I'm involved with, I will help you financially significantly. We're just waiting for the trigger to pull on it.
Oh, yeah. Ann knows a lot about that too. And I'll talk to her
Yeah.
about it a little bit. But I was thinking, when you talked about all those COVID tests, that could have well got that pneumonia going.
Well, they have. I have a friend in the Hebrew Roots movement. His name is Dr. Jack Sneeden. He's a pathogenic virologist. And when all this went down, I went and saw him and got an exemption letter, so I didn't have to wear the mask. And he got his medical degree in 5 years. I mean, 5 years. And his committee chairman that was on his committee, he was a doctor from the London School of Roads. And so Jack just has one of these minds where he doesn't study or anything. He just reads it and he's got it and holds on to it. And so he got through medical school. Well, he isolated coronavirus in cats and dogs. And he explained to me really what's going on. Dr. Andrew Kaufman just put out a great film, I guess it was 2 nights ago, called Terrain, the film. They went through and they showed exactly how all this has been designed. They've done all the genetic sequencing by computer modeling. There is no coronavirus. Okay, it's something else that's going on. And so they're finding with the swabs, they have graphene oxide on them, and when they puncture I forgot what the name of the tissue that's back there in the back of the nasal cavity that goes into the brain. It's the block between the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah.
They puncture that, and that goes right into the bloodstream. And so people are getting, respiratory pneumonia that become hospitalized. Then the next move is the hospitals are wanting to put them on remdesivir without anybody knowing, and that you just suffocate with that because their lungs fill up with fluid. Then they throw them on a ventilator, and that is, you can't have any liquid in your lungs, and they basically drown from the ventilator. So there's just been a lot going on. We haven't caught up. I've been through so much and learned so much. It's just unbelievable. And
You need a good lawyer.
Don't even get me going in that direction. I've been in the law field here, or with my divorce with my ex. I had married an attorney's daughter, and we divorced in 2005. Started the divorce. We're still in it, even today. And but it's finally getting over. My son just turned 18. He just completed his Eagle Scout, and I'm so grateful to God that he's turned out to be such a wonderful, wonderful son, and he doesn't have any of the qualities that I had growing up and doing the things I did. We've homeschooled him, and he's just brilliant, and he's an awesome.
Yeah, I know that kid.
Yeah, you do.
I haven't seen him since he was 13. He's something else.
Yeah.
How old is he? 18 now?
He just turned 18, January 18th.
Wow. Is he still a nerd?
I
hope so.
Yeah, I guess so. I thought nerds were candy.
Mm-hmm. Well, he doesn't have long hair and bell-bottom jeans, does he?
No.
Thank
His
goodness.
dad did at one time or another.
Yeah. Okay, Michael. I feel horrible about that, but I think that everybody here has the same feeling. I think almost that's becoming a common thing in our country now.
It's by design.
Yeah. Well, what else? What other way could it be?
Yeah.
Yeah, the devil's got his hand in everything. But, some of the prophets speak about before, right at the beginning of the millennial time, that's when all hell breaks loose. So the evil can be recognized and can be dealt with, because you can't exorcise the cancer unless it shows itself. That's what I've got to think, because I'm naive. Okay, you guys, I'm going to go, and enjoy your evening tonight. We'll get back together next week. I want to thank you for coming. I think we got something going here. I promise I'll use a stopwatch next time. Here's a little praise for you. Praise for the night. Thank Yah, from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, ye people here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, who both are one. Amen. I just had to get rid of the Trinity in there. I know I did. You'll never let me forget that, will you, Andrew?
Brother Andrew, that's the pot calling the kettle black. I watched 5 hours of your video today.
The pot calling the kettle black. Oh my goodness.